It's estimated on any given day in Oklahoma, 350 children are ready and waiting to be adopted. Thousands more are hoping to find adoptive parents. We spoke with two Oklahoma families that brought special children into their homes and lives through adoption.
Well, I was adopted. I spent my first 2 years of life in foster care, and then I was adopted, and so it's always just been a passion of mine from before I even had biological children, that I wanted to do this someday, just to change lives, whether it be through foster or adoption, just bring in children.
And I think whenever she decided that she wanted to contact somebody from DHS, because we had originally started with a private agency, and whenever she decided DHS, she reached out to a friend of mine that I worked with for a long time. She contacted her and said, hey, we'd like to, we want to adopt, and, we'd like a baby. And then they talked to her about, to get a baby, you're going to have to foster before.
The way the foster program works, or with DHS, is that you sign up as a foster parent. So you're just saying, hey, I'm willing to take in kids from 0 to 18 or 0 to 5 or 5 to 18 or 5 to 9. I mean, it's whatever. There's all kinds of foster parents. So many couples do DHS adoption because there are a lot of infants with DHS that are available.
Any agency, I believe, has a short notice. When they get a baby that needs a placement, they call open homes, and called us and gave me an hour notice, and I got there, and our worker was there and met us, and they brought the baby from the hospital, and it just happened like that.
Our adoption story started with my wife and I wanting to do an international adoption, and we started filling out the paperwork, going through home studies, background checks, everything for the documents that was required domestically and internationally for that process. And then in the middle of that process, we had a domestic adoption essentially fall in our lap. And that was, I was at work one day and a lady was there in labor, and I work in the emergency department, and she was in labor, and so I delivered a baby. And then later she had said to one of the nurses that she wasn't sure what she was going to do. She had 2 kids at home and thought she might want to give them up for adoption. And one of the other staff members was like, Russ, you should take that baby home. You guys want to adopt.
And he's like, guess what? I just delivered a baby. Like, great, awesome. Like, this is the first time he's ever done that, but I knew, he could just. But then about 20 minutes later, he calls me back and he's like, okay, this mom thinks she can't take care of this child. Could we adopt them? And I said, yes, and just started crying at work.
So in a lot of cases, birth parents and adoptive parents meet each other in various ways. In Ross and Aubrey's case, the baby literally kind of fell in their lap. But in a lot of the other cases, they know each other through some distant relative, through some friend, something like that, that brings them together. And then the adoptive parents will usually call me, I'll represent them, and then there's another lawyer that will represent the birth parents so that their rights are protected. And then we just go through the process. I typically call the birth mom's attorney at the very beginning to meet with the birth mom to verify this is indeed what she wants. She wants to place her baby for adoption, and that she understands all of her rights. She understands about going to court. And then also to get history about the birth father, to see if he's also in agreement with the adoption. If he's not in agreement, what are the circumstances to see whether this adoption can go through.
Just having our attorney really help us and be familiar with the process really helped. She knew this is the document to take to the hospital. This is what we need to do next. This is the day. This is how things typically go. You usually interact with the birth mother this way, and really just gave us advice about what to do and how to do it.
As soon as I got off work that night, I went straight up to the hospital to meet with the birth mom, and she was wonderful. She was incredibly sweet, and she just wanted the best for this baby. And I have the utmost respect for her. She just wanted to provide her baby with a better life. And from the minute I met her, I felt so comfortable with her. And we just talked for hours about everything.
And I think that birth mothers and adoptive parents really develop a relationship that's really special. I think that there's just that idea that, it's two moms, uniting and knowing what's the right thing for the child. And so I see it more oftentimes than not that birth mom allows their needs coincide, basically. So adoptive mom is met and birth moms are met.
So when birth moms come in and they come to court, they are placing their babies for adoption. A lot of people say that they're giving up their babies for adoption, but they are making a birth plan for their children, and they are placing their babies, they are trusting their child with the adoptive family. And what they are doing is a true act of love.
For other Oklahomans who are looking to do a private adoption, just keep looking, keep hope, and just know that there's many different ways that it might happen, and adoption is just wonderful.
Like later on down the road, I could see maybe being foster parents again.
Something that's always been a passion of mine is to think about fostering older children. I probably would adopt every child that's aging out just so they'd have a mom and dad. I know it sounds cliche, but it almost feels like just full circle, just like this is why I'm here, and there's a reason, that we're supposed to do it, and yeah, she's pretty amazing.
With us now are Link Gillette, who works DHS adoption cases, Noelle Tucker, who practices family adoptions and surrogacy law, and Amber Godfrey, who practices in Oklahoma City and focuses on family law, adoption, and guardianships. Noelle, in the state of Oklahoma, who is eligible to adopt?
Statute provides for a married couple, as long as you're 21 or over, a single person, 21 or over, or the husband of a spouse that has a child, such as a step-parent adoption. So you've got, the statute also requires a home study, which is going to cover all the requirements as far as no felony, background checks, all that sort of stuff. But as long as you're 21, single, married, or a step-parent, you are eligible to adopt. And with the advent of a recent decision in 2014 of same-sex parentage, it was determined that you can no longer limit adoption to husband and wife. It can be husband and husband or wife and wife.
Link, how is a private adoption different from a DHS adoption?
A DHS adoption is an adoption where the children who are being adopted are in the state of Oklahoma's care, and the custody is with the Department of Human Services. And in those cases, the people who are eligible to adopt are approved foster parents or approved adoptive parents through the Department of Human Services who have placement of a child that is in their home.
What are the fees and timetables involved?
With a DHS adoption, as opposed to private adoption or step-parent adoption, there is adoption subsidy available to pay for the attorney's fees and the adoption-related expenses. So to the adoptive parent in a DHS adoption, they don't have to pay any expenses.
Noelle, what is the attorney's role in an adoption?
Well, again, it depends on whether you're a private agency or through the juvenile system. The attorney's role, as I see it and as I counsel my clients, is to get you through the process, to make sure that, first of all, adoption is a two-step process. The first step is severing the parental rights between the biological parents. The second step, which has to be done in a second hearing, is establishing that new parent-child relationship. So the attorney is guiding, depending on your client, either the adoptive parent or assisting the biological parent terminate their rights, to make sure the law is followed, to make sure that proper notice is given to the biological parents whose rights are being terminated or consent determined to be not necessary, and make sure that all the requirements are met for that second stage to secure a solid adoption that is not likely to come undone, because nobody wants an adoption to come undone.
And that's right. Do you match the people wanting to adopt with the birth mother?
I don't. Agencies can. Typically, I don't typically work with agencies, and so when we have, for example, an infant adoption, it's often the adoptive couple coming to you saying, I've located a birth mother, help me make this solidified. Occasionally you'll find a birth mother who says, I really can't afford this baby, I can't support this baby, or whatever, medically I can't take care of this child. And just because of it's a fairly tight-knit community within which we work, and so we oh my gosh, I happen to know Noelle happens to have a client who's been looking for a child to be adopted. And so there's a lot of networking that takes place in that regard. Otherwise, agencies can help connect that as well.
Is it a good idea? Is it a good idea for the birth mother to be involved in the process beyond the adoption, ultimately?
It depends. I think the conventional wisdom and the psychology more and more is saying it's good for the child. And I think we all, as family law attorneys, tend to focus on the best interest of the child. That's also how we best represent our parent or our client. And that child is going to know eventually that they are adopted. It may be when they're 16, 17, and now you have an angry teenager. It may be when they're 25 and they're trying to figure it out. So I encourage my clients from the beginning to let them know that there is a biological set of parents out there, and sometimes you have that open adoption where there's communication, sharing of pictures, and sometimes that adoptive or the relinquishing parent, the biological parent, is just too emotional. It's like, I don't want any contact, I don't want to know.
And I think it also depends on the context within which you get the adoption. If it's a
Is it
DHS
family?
adoption.
Is it an interfamily
Yeah,
adoption?
or-
They tend to know because
exactly.
it's aunt's sister's brother or whatever.
Or if it's even DHS adoption and maybe dad's in jail and mom's a meth addict, do we really want this child having that connection till they're really old enough to understand mentally and emotionally what that means to have this person in their life?
Other than those threshold requirements, are there other requirements for prospective adoptive parents? Other factors that you look to determine whether this is going to work or not?
Legally or psychologically?
Either one.
Because, I mean, do you want to speak to home study requirements?
Well, with an approved adoptive home, you have to be able to show a financial assessment that you're able to meet the needs of yourself, your family members, the people who live with you, and also be able to take care of this child. So you have to at least be able to show that financially to be able to adopt.
And there's even a medical component too. If you can be deemed not medically well enough to care for this child that is going to be placed with you, then that can also be a trigger to maybe let's not finalize this.
A home study is required for an adoption. And for an infant adoption, there's a home study requirement before the child is placed in your home. Then there's a home study required after the child is placed in your home before the final decree is done. That home study is required by statute to cover many things: the financial aspect, psychological aspect, medical aspect, make sure you don't have any felony convictions or any child abuse allegations against you. So all those things are really kind of covered there. But yes, both those have to be done. They can be waived in a step-parent adoption, but the background checks and some of those things, then the private attorney will go ahead and have to accomplish some of those without doing a full home study.
Noelle Tucker, Link Gillette, Amber Godfrey, thank you for joining us on Ask a Lawyer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.